Fairly recently on this channel, we discussed the old internet and what that freedom meant for the communities that used them. We talked about this ancient internet with a lens of inexperience since we didn't actually live through that era of the internet. The video had me thinking of the internet that we actually did grow up with. When my generation were kids, we were subjected to some of the spookiest images and stories the internet could offer. It's now become sort of a dark joke that a lot of us were violently traumatized by having unlimited internet access, and this video isn't going to get into the absolutely horrid things that we experienced, like sites like Best Gore. It also so happens that creepypasta retrospectives aren't anything creative anymore, as plenty of creators have talked this to death. But since they were such an integral part of our childhoods and eventually led us into making this channel, we wanted to throw our hat in the ring. So this time we're giving ourselves a break from the horrors of true crime and the research that goes into something like an ARG. This video isn't to debunk anything or uncover some massive secret to creepypastas. This is just creepypastas, how we remember them. It's the early 2010s and my friend at summer camp asked me if I've ever heard of the Slender Man. I was about 10 and only just recently began exploring the internet freely, so I'd never heard of anything like that, but even the name just scared me. My friend pulled out his phone and started playing this game called Slender the 8 Pages, and I was terrified, walking the woods looking for the titular 8 pages, all the while being stalked by the Slender Man, a tall and skinny blank-faced creature donning a suit. This is my first interaction in the world of creepypastas, and I was terrified, but hooked. I immediately began doing research on this Slender Man and found the iconic images that first made their way onto the Something Awful forums created by Victor Surge. These first 2 images of Slender Man are still haunting. The artistry that went into these just for a small paranormal Photoshop competition on Something Awful is astounding. I remember watching countless hours of videos on Slender Man. I became completely obsessed. I drew the 8 pages and hung them around my room. It was ironic that I was so obsessed with Slender Man and still was absolutely horrified. My friends and I swore we saw Slender on countless occasions. I remember one rainy day on my grandmother's farm looking out into the cornfields on the phone with my friend and seeing the corn stalks blow in the breeze and seeing Slender Man among them. Of course, this wasn't real and it was just my obsession taking wind and me seeing something that I wanted to see. But that didn't matter. As far as my friends were concerned, Slender Man was real and something we needed to look out for. This is the brilliance of creepypastas and how they present themselves as something set in reality. Even though I knew where Slender Man originated from and knew he couldn't possibly be real, I still believed somehow. Creepypastas around this time became the modern version of cryptids. It was 2010 and Bigfoot just wasn't cutting it anymore. Now that I'm an adult and dissecting spooky things on the internet for a living, it's fun to look back and see how well some of these old creepypastas hold up. And in my opinion, Slender Man absolutely still holds up. Slender Man did have some very horrible and unfortunate spotlight in the mainstream media when in 2014 2 12-year-old girls held down and stabbed their friend 19 times as a sort of sacrifice to the fictional character. Fortunately, the victim did survive and is doing well today. This horrific event created some real-world panic with parents being concerned about Slender Man and creepypastas as a whole being detrimental to their kids and would turn them into killers. But this is simply the same debate asking if violent video games make kids violent. Since this event brought public attention to Slender Man, we did end up getting a movie years after its initial popularity, and yeah, the movie stinks. I don't want to go into a full review here, but it is a painful flick, but honestly worth watching for just how bad it is. Creepypastas definitely didn't start with Slender Man, but his explosion in popularity made the genre go from niche to mainstream. I'm not going to sit here and act like he was all alone, as the next one I want to talk about is Jeff the Killer. Jeff the Killer is a teen who had the misfortune of being burned and then had a mental breakdown leaving him with a bleach white face, sunken eyes, and bloody grin, wrapped in his iconic white hoodie. I always found Jeff to be more frightening when I was younger, and that all came from this image, which genuinely still gives me chills to this day. Jeff didn't get the massive explosion like Slender Man did, but he is undoubtedly one of the forefathers of creepypastas. I don't remember the first time I encountered Jeff, but like I said, that image terrified me, and I vaguely remember it being featured in a video I was watching, and I immediately turned it off. I would watch a lot of these videos and read the creepypastas at home, and started to do so in school as well, so I mustered up the courage while at school one day to read Jeff's story, and ignored that image as fast as I possibly could. The story freaked me out, and I remember looking out my window every night to check if Jeff was out there. If you couldn't tell by now, I was easily scared when I was younger and was quite gullible, but it honestly left me with so many more memories than just reading the stories themselves. I got really into the Jeff the Killer expanded media. I used to draw him frequently in class as well, and even dressed up as him on Halloween when I was younger. I still never grew the thick enough skin to not be put off by that image though. When creepypastas started to become something we looked back on, I read a lot of these ones I loved like I did with Slenderman. While Slenderman spawned a sprawling mythos, while Jeff was really only just an image and the story that accompanied it. The Jeff the Killer creepypasta absolutely does not hold up to today's standards and genuinely would only really scare a child. It's written so edgy and very, this is so scary, isn't it? It was laughable that I was afraid of it as a child, but the image did a lot of the heavy lifting, and as we all know, I was a frightened child. Unlike Slenderman, Jeff has a massive mystery surrounding him to this day. While from the start we knew where Slenderman originated, that iconic image of Jeff is still unsolved. It may seem like it's solved since the real image surfaces every year, but every year those images are debunked, as far as I know at the time of writing this. These next two are also some massive heavy hitters from this era, and I thought it would be right to lump them together because they both fall under a type of animalistic fear, those two being the Rake and Smile Dog. Starting off with the Rake, I don't have a very specific memory of when I found out what it was, but it was probably around the same time as Jeff. The Rake, like the others I mentioned of course, scared me to death, and that iconic image to use for the Rake is still quite unsettling. Being around 6 feet tall with a body that is a dark parody of a human body, with exposed ribs and sunken eyes, the Rake just spooked the hell out of me. We actually did an entire video about a subclass of cryptids called crawlers, which is the exact description for the Rake, and we spoke a lot about him in that video, which I would highly recommend. One thing that still bothers me about the Rake is that famous image. I swore up and down that image was a screenshot from a video of the Rake getting closer to the camera, but when we were researching the video about crawlers, I never found that original video. If you have any specific memory about this, please make sure to leave it below. The Rake's entire gimmick was giving you nightmares and lingering at the edge of your bed, and that mental image haunted me then and kinda still does now. As a 20-year-old man, when I wake up in the middle of the night to a pitch black room, my brain reverts to being terrified of what could lurk in the dark. And one of the first things I imagine is the Rake breathing slowly as it sits at the edge of my bed. As I said before, we do have an entire video of creatures like the Rake and attempt to debunk the sightings, so please check that out if this part of the video was intriguing to you. I do think the Rake mythos still holds up and presents itself as multiple sightings rather than one story. It feels more akin to the modern day cryptid thing I mentioned with Slenderman and can be creatively used even in the modern era. The next one is smile.jpg, and this entire creepypasta was almost like a creepy chain email. The story hinged off of this picture with a dog smiling a giant toothy grin eerily in the corner of a dark room. Or the other version of a much more stereotypical spooky image of a blown out picture of a very demonic looking dog that is drenched in the color red. The picture itself is unsettling, but the background is what freaked me out. The story is that if you were sent the file image smile.jpg and don't share it, you will wind up going insane and dying. The story claims that the actual smile.jpg does not exist online, and the original version is only able to be viewed from getting the image itself in an email. Smile Dog is really similar to Jeff the Killer in the sense that the image is so famous, but there is no source. In the same fashion, the Smile Dog origin image gets debunked every so often, but never truly debunked, and hopefully one day the internet is able to team up and figure out this iconic image's origin. Smile Dog was never one that I had a massive connection to like the others I mentioned, but the image was and still is spooky, and the story along with it is as classic as they come, even though it was a typical chainmail story that took inspiration from The Ring. I still think it holds up fairly well. The next two I'm going to lump together as well since they are both video game creepypastas, those being Ben Drowned and Lavender Town Syndrome. Both of the stories I have with these are pretty similar as well. Starting with Ben Drowned, which was about a haunted copy of Majora's Mask on the Nintendo 64. The haunted cartridge featured a creepy Link statue that followed the player around the entire game named Ben. I believe at the time it was unknown if Ben was a ghost or some creepy AI, but I remember watching countless videos on it and tried to find one of the haunted cartridges on eBay, obviously to no avail. I do remember seeking out a fan-made Ben Drowned version on a ROM site and played it until the statue showed up, and then I chickened out and never went back to it. On doing some base research on whatever happened to the Ben Drowned story, apparently it was always an ARG and even lasted all the way until 2020. The next one hails from the original Pokemon Red and Blue, and the infamous Lavender Town. Lavender Town is one of the main towns that you have to go to in Pokemon, and it is complete tonal whiplash. As soon as you enter the town, you are hit with such spooky 8-bit music, which has become iconic, as has everything else in the original Pokemon. What made this town so off-putting, other than the music, was that it housed a Pokemon graveyard, which is so jarring in a game where none of your Pokemon actually die. They of course always faint when defeated. This leads us to the creepypasta, which is more like an urban legend, but it was always featured in discussions of famous creepypastas, and I had a major connection with this, so I figured I'd put it in here. As the urban legend goes, the original copy of Pokemon in Japan had a version of the Lavender Town song that for some unforeseen reason caused children to get severe headaches, cause harm to themselves, and even commit. Even though I knew it was only the Japanese copies, I had an American copy of Pokemon Green on the Game Boy Advance, and never finished it because I was so scared of falling victim to the Lavender Town syndrome. I did eventually beat the game. Pokemon Green is of course a classic, and I am a diehard Charmander fan, but this, like the others, scared me to death. I knew a kid who swore that his friend died because he obtained a Japanese copy of the game and that Lavender Town got him, but that was just children making up stories, of course. The Lavender Town syndrome is not real. There was never a single documented case of any kids falling victim to the cursed song, but it is widely believed that the inspiration from this story came from an episode of Pokemon that only aired in Japan and caused over 600 seizures in children, leaving 2 hospitalized. This also used to float around the internet, and the episode was obviously never aired again, and as far as I know, Porygon never showed up again in the Pokemon anime to avoid a similar thing happening. I think this spooky story holds up. It was debunked even then, but as a fictional urban legend, I like it, and it hinges on the horror of Lavender Town in an otherwise innocent game. The last one I want to discuss is the famous creepypasta 1999. This one details a specific channel on a local cable channel in Canada and its weird programming for kids. It centers around a man documenting his experience with the strange TV channel as a child and now as an adult, trying to figure out exactly what was going on. The channel featured a show called Mr. Bear's Cellar, as well as many others like Soup and Spoon with hand puppets that did strange things, but Mr. Bear was the main attraction. Mr. Bear was an extremely low-budget show of the titular Mr. Bear in a horrible-looking bear costume sitting and talking to the camera. In this specific episode, Mr. Bear urges the children to write him and he'll read the letters in the next episode. The main character writes to Mr. Bear and gets a letter back telling him to come to the cellar. The kid and his dad went to the cellar and found that the police were searching the place but never really knew why, until the present day. The story revolves around the main character searching for answers and found out that Mr. Bear was kidnapping these children that made it to his cellar and burned them alive in the final episode. These episodes were all kept by the local police station when they were investigating Mr. Bear. I loved this creepypasta as a kid, and it stands out as being the only one that didn't absolutely terrify me. I just thought it was a really well-written story. It has since become my favorite creepypasta. It isn't long and convoluted, it never devolved into nonsense like a lot of the others, and I believe it holds up the absolute best out of all the ones we discussed here today. With that, we come to the end. As stated at the beginning, this was a lot more casual of a video than normal. I wanted to remember these as I actually remember them, with less research where it feels like I'm reading from the Creepypasta wiki. I really wanted this video to be as raw as possible. Creepypastas were such an instrumental part of my youth, and I know plenty of you out there feel the same way. Creepypastas are our modern horror icons. The 80s had Jason and Freddy, and the 2000s kids had Slender Man and Jeff the Killer. Creepypastas introduced an entire new generation into the horror genre, and I think the next few years we'll see a lot of artists and visionaries use these silly internet stories as a jumping off point to make some amazing things. This channel was partially influenced by my love of creepypastas. I fell in love with internet mysteries, and the fact that I now get to explore them as part of my job is amazing. We made sure to give the old internet a ton of love, and since we didn't get to experience it, it does feel old, and I know we received plenty of comments saying that. But now that this age is getting older, it reminds me how much time has passed since I was trading Pokemon cards and reading these stories. Even though I'm older now, these things have stuck with me, and in my most primal moments where I feel that genuine fear when the lights go out, these guys come into my mind before anything else. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a bit of an unorthodox video, but it was really fun remembering these creepypastas, and make sure you leave down in the comments below what creepypastas you remember and all of your childhood experiences. If you guys did like the video, make sure to comment down below. We'd be happy to do another one. I know there are plenty of creepypastas that I did miss. If you do like the channel, make sure to check out our social medias. They're all going to be in the description below. Make sure to stop by our Discord. It really is the best place to chat with us and hang with fellow debunk enthusiasts. Of course, if you'd like to support the channel a little bit more, please head over to our Patreon Debunk Plus. For only $1 a month, you guys get access to videos early, script PDFs, whatever random stuff we decide to put up, and more. As always, my name is Seth from Debunk File. See you guys next time. Bye.